Shabbat Shalom, Shalom Aleichem, Assalamu Alaikum. A renewal, Pax Vobiscum, peace be unto you. Welcome back to the Septuagint versus the Masoretic YouTube channel. In this video, we're going to look at Judges chapter 8. And again, we're using this format where you can only see the scriptures. So let me know what you think about that. If you want me to continue using this presentation, this style, or if you prefer the older style from the previous videos before Judges 7, everything before Judges 7. But I'm going to do it this way and see how that goes. So there are 35 verses in this chapter, Judges 8. First mentionable difference is in verse 3. It says, their children, the children of Ephraim, their spirit calmed toward him, who is Gideon, versus their anger was abated. So the difference is, their spirit was calm versus their anger being abated. So the children of Ephraim as a whole, their spirit was calmer. I'm not sure how else to express it, but you can see that it wasn't so much, not that it wasn't anger, but it was more of their spirit became calm rather than them being in a state of anger. I just feel like, okay, why am I pointing this out? Because if one has a spirit of, let's just say, animosity or violence, when your spirit calms down, it's more, I'd say it's more overarching to have a spirit that is calm or becomes calm rather than anger simply being abated. Do you know what I mean? It's more it's overarching. I think I said that already, but it controls everything else. The spirit can control everything else. Whereas if it's just anger, then it can be easily reversed and they can become angry again. So I just want to point that out because I think that's an interesting distinction. Whereas it's less, not that it's less, but it's more relating to their spirit within them rather than simply emotional, which can be a little, although simpler, but at the same time less, it's more compartmentalized, if that makes any sense. Okay? It's like saying the central nervous system was calmed down. I'm not saying that, this isn't a good analogy, but I'm saying that it controls more. The spirit controls more rather than just saying anger, which is one emotion out of, thousands. Okay, that was long-winded, but let's move on. Verse 7, our next mentionable. It says here, Barkanim. Okay. Barkanim, that's an unknown term. I'm not sure what that means. However, in the Masoretic text, it does say briars, so we're going to have to go with that because Barkanim, if you do a word study on that, it's very difficult to find anything, if you find anything at all. Okay, actually, I'm going to go back to verse 4. This is ignoring this verse. However, I'm pointing this out because it uses the term hungry. In the Septuagint, the Masoretic, it uses faint. But the next verse, in verse 5, describes that the 300 men with Gideon, his men, became faint. So they were hungry in verse 4, but they were described as faint in verse 5. The Masoretic, it stays the same. They're faint in both. So I believe that Faint could be a synonym for hungry. However, it could also be progressive, where one starts off hungry and then you become progressively weaker into the state called faint, feeling faint of due to hunger pangs. Not to be confused with weary. Okay, that's verse 4. So we're going to skip over to verse 13. Significant difference here. It says, down from the battle of Ares. So that seems to be a specific locale, or a place that is mentioned geographically. That's where Gideon is coming from. However, you don't really hear about Ares anywhere else, so it could possibly be before the sun. Could be that. I'm not sure. But I'm going to leave that open to interpretation. What does that mean? Battle of Ares versus before the sun was up. Did he go and battle Ares? Did he go to a place where there was a battle and that place was Ares? In any case, let's move on to verse 14. Significant difference here. It says, wrote up. I should say, wrote to him the names of the princes. So he took prisoner the young lad of the men of Sukkoth, and this young man wrote the names of the princes to Gideon. He identified the names of the princes. Seems to be important information. Why couldn't Gideon get this before? I'm not sure. However, in the Masoretic, it talks about how this young man described the princes of Sukkoth. So did he not know what they looked like? So it's interesting, that difference. I'm not sure. I mean, normally I lean to the Septuagint. Perhaps it was just the names, that he wrote the names identifying who those princes are. Because maybe he didn't know who they were, since they were a large number of them. It says 77 men. So how is he supposed to know all of these unless you know the names of them? So the names of the princes and the elders. However, if this same young lad, I mean, he memorized 77 names, that's great, but for him to describe all 77 of them, giving them a physical profile, a description of these men, that's very in-depth. I think it's less likely, in my opinion. Okay, we're moving on to verse 16. This is our first difference, a big difference, I should say, in this chapter. It says here that Gideon tore. Okay, I think it's verse 19. Okay, no, it's 18. Why can't I find that? Oh, it's verse 16. Okay, sorry. It says he tore the men of the city with the thorns, as well as the briars, according to Masoretic text, because we don't know what Barkanim is. We can only assume what that is, but in the Masoretic, it says that he taught them. He taught them using thorns and briars. What are you teaching them? Teaching them a lesson? In the Hebrew, it's yada. There's like 3 different words here. So what does taught mean? Let's look that up. It's probably going to open a new window. Or just open it. Okay. So yada means to know, to perceive, to recognize. So he's instructing them using thorns and briars. I mean, how else can you understand this word? I just want to show you how ridiculous this is. Okay, so again, it's taught, and it's saying it's an imperfect noun, or a verb, I should say. So we are back. We are still at verse 16. Let's scroll all the way down here. Let's just make sure we cover all our bases. So it says eth, contracted in the demonstrative sense of entity. So it doesn't really give us anything else. So it does mean taught. So they're not leaving it up to... There's no other connotations for that word. So they're saying he literally taught them, Gideon did, taught the men of Sukkot using thorns and briars. So he instructed them like a teacher would instruct her students with a big ruler. I don't think that's what happened. Because he did tell them, I promise you, I will destroy the city. If you look at the previous verse, I believe this was the beginning of the... Here it is. I will tear your flesh. He says that in both translations. So the Septuagint is actually the correct translation here. And it has that pattern, that reputation of being correct. Most of the time it says he tore the men of the city with the thorns and the briars. So he I don't know if he killed them or he simply wounded them, but doesn't seem to imply he killed them. But I don't know. I'm not sure, because in the next verse, when he goes to Penuel, he actually kills the men of the city. He didn't just teach them a lesson. He didn't just tear them. Maybe he killed all of them. Maybe he was that vengeful. Gideon was. He told them, if you don't do this, if you don't help us, I'll do this to you. And then he did it. He followed through with what he said. Okay, so that's verse 16. Verse 18, another significant difference in verse 18 says, where Gideon asking Zeba and Zalmunna, or Zebi and Salmana, where are the men whom you slew in Tabor? Okay, where are they? The Masoretic Gideon is not asking that question. He's not asking where they are. He's asking what kind of men, what manner of men did you kill? Why wouldn't he know what kind of men they were? I think he does know the answer. But as for him saying where they are, that makes more sense as to where they currently are, because the answer is a little dark. They answer Gideon, Zeba and Zalmunna. They respond, as you, I'm going to insert are, as you are, so they. Okay. So as you are, you're, I guess, alive. So were they. They were alive, according to the likeness of the son of a king. And they looked like the son of a king as well. So maybe they're kind of being a little clever with their response, saying, "Oh, you were alive, but you know they used to be alive, and they also look like a king, just like you do." So yeah, that sounds like a really dark answer. It sounds like something from a horror movie. But asking what kind of men they are, this also makes sense too. I'm not saying it does not make sense. It makes sense in the narrative flow. Both of them do. One sounds really dark, responding as you are, so were they. It makes sense either way. Okay, so that's 18. Verse 21, for your power is as that of a man. So this is where Zeba and Zalmunna, Yether, the firstborn of Gideon, he was instructed by his father to kill these two, but he was afraid and he did not do it. So Zeba and Zalmunna, they request, Gideon, you kill us because your power is as that of a man. In the Masoretic, it says almost the same thing. It's just written in reverse. For as the man is, so is his strength. So it's in reverse. Your strength is like a man versus your power is as that of a man versus as the man is his strength. So don't send a boy to do a man's job. Maybe that's what they're trying to say. There's an omission in this verse of round ornaments. Some even say that they were moon-shaped. And in fact, verse 26 confirms that, yes, they were indeed moon-shaped. And they were also Ishmaelites, according to verse 24. So in verse 25, we notice that Gideon opened his garment to receive these spoils, these earrings. And in the Masoretic, he did not open his garment or take initiative. It's the people that took initiative themselves. They were the ones who spread the garment. Okay, verse 26. It says here, a significant difference. There was an omission of the word crescents besides the crescent. So in fact, these what were they called? Ornaments were crescent shaped. Interesting. Versus ornaments, they just simply call them ornaments in verse 26. Garments versus collars as well. And verse 32, significant difference again. In his city, it says here, in his city, that's where Gideon died, versus he died in a good old age. So it's giving us a specific place, important detail as to where Gideon died. He died in his city. What city is that? I think we know the answer to that. We've looked at it in previous chapters. Okay, and it says here Abi Esdri versus the Abizarites, or Abizrites. Okay, next we're going to look at verse 33. There's a big difference here. It says they made for the, before I move on to verse 33, I'm just going to point out that, yes, the Ishmaelites seem to have there seems to be a common thread here, because as you know, many Muslims can trace their lineage to Ishmael. Okay, and it's interesting how even in this book, in the Septuagint version of Judges chapter 8, it mentions how the Ishmaelites had these ornaments shaped like crescent moons. What else is a crescent besides a moon? And to this day, that's one of the primary symbols of Islam is the crescent moon. So go figure. It seems to be, that symbol seems to be preserved even to our day for thousands of years. The Ishmaelites preserved that symbol. That's really interesting. And that's further proof that these are the scriptures are the word of God, the Septuagint more specifically, because if you're looking at the Masoretic text, you don't realize that, yeah, these are crescent-shaped ornaments that the Ishmaelites wore. Okay, verse 33, big difference here. It says that they made for themselves, this is the children of Israel, they made for themselves a covenant with that name of the false god, Baal, that he should be their Elohim. Verses, it says in the other Masoretic, doesn't say that they made a covenant. It says they made Baal Berith their Elohim. So it seems to be naming a specific Elohim. So this is not simply Israel whoring after one false Elohim. I don't believe that's what it is. Because the Septuagint explicitly says that they actively made for themselves a covenant like a marriage agreement, okay, with this false Elohim by the name of Baal. And that is just blatant. I'm going to get into it later, but it's just blatant betrayal, in my opinion. No wonder Elohim was mad. He was very upset with them. And it seems to be a vicious cycle throughout their history. Verse 35, mercifully versus kindness. And then it says what Gideon did, the good he did versus which he showed. And then I just go to my final reflection of this chapter. When I was reading through, I reflected on what I've read, and the children of Israel in this time period of Gideon, actually after Gideon, they truly did treacherously. They dealt treacherously with Yah, Elohim, by making a covenant with the false Elohim. Starts with a B. So they really betrayed Yah. Regarding verse 34, how different is modern Israel today in 2023 in terms of forgetting Yah, Elohim? Is there national repentance or even national religious fervor? I would say no. No, it's a minority that are repentant or even showing zeal for their faithfulness to the true Elohim. They put their faith in their military strength and in other things and in other Elohim. There's so many secular Yehudim, and it's a sad state of affairs, but that's the reality we live in. But it has to be that way, because only if there's the state we have today, I mean, not the physical state, I mean the spiritual state of the people of Israel must be this way right now, because there's going to be a turning of their hearts and a transformation that's going to happen according to the prophets. So this is all part of the plan. It's all part of the prophecies. So this is just further proof that the word of Yah, his holy scriptures, are in fact true. So that's all for this chapter. It's quite lengthy. Just thank you very much for your time. Until next time, we'll look at Judges chapter 9. Shabbat Shalom and Maranatha.